Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest.
Fred Armisen.
Fritz Paul.
Javier Munoz. Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Talkhouse Podcast. I'm Josh Modell. And man, this is kind of a dream episode for me because I managed to wrangle two of my favorite songwriter, performer, lyricists ever into a conversation. Matt Berninger and Alan Sparhawk. Now, Sparhawk first came to my attention way back in the early 90s with his band Low. Over the course of 30-ish years, he and his wife, Mimi Parker, created an almost indescribably stunning body of work. The early days were characterized by slow, spare, minimalist songs, but over the decades, Low blossomed in 100 beautiful ways, from stark, almost confrontational music made with Steve Albini to some of the sweetest pop songs you'll ever hear, to their final incarnation, in which they organically integrated some harsh electronics. It's hard to believe they went so long and stayed so true, but they did. It's a pretty perfect catalog. Then, in 2022, Parker died of cancer. Sparhawk worked through some of his grief by pushing right back into music, first with 2024's White Roses, My God, a dense, electronics-heavy album that sounds like confusion itself. Now, just months later, he's set to release another album, this one called With Trampled by Turtles. The title references the Duluth band that backed him on it, and the songs themselves offer a much more clear-eyed, straightforward look at where his head is at. They're so different, but both really powerful. Check out a little bit of the song Not Broken, which features Sparhawk and Parker's daughter Hollis on vocals.
It's not broken. I'm not angry. It's not broken.
I think Matt Berninger, the other half of today's conversation, feels as strongly about Low and Alan's music as I do. He's been listening since before his band, The National, had even come together. Perhaps you're aware of their history, but just in case, The National has been making incredible records since 2001, finding pretty huge success with cathartic, arena-sized songs that are still always grounded by Berninger's intentional, literate words. Just as with Low, it's impossible for me to pick a favorite record, but today it's Alligator from 2005. But Berninger, like Sparhawk, has had plenty of side projects over the years, and his second proper solo album is coming out this week as well. It's called Get Sunk, and it feels like a sort of deliberate step away from any semblance of gloom, with Berninger writing about childhood summers and more innocent times. Don't get me wrong, these songs aren't without their emotional perils, but they do feel different enough from his main gig that you'll notice. Oh, and in case I didn't mention it, it's really great. Check out a little bit of the song Bonnet of Pins from Get Sunk right here.
She finishes off my drink and puts on a bonnet of pins and says, I thought I'd find you much quicker than this. You must have thought I didn't exist.
Sparhawk and Berninger don't waste much time with idle chit-chat in this episode. They've both been through the mental health ringer over the years, and they explore those low lows with the benefit, thankfully, of some hindsight. Matt has some really insightful things to say about Alan's recent solo records, and they dive into their religious backgrounds with perhaps the funniest, potentially deadliest interview question ever asked on Talkhouse. What are your thoughts on God and religion? Go. Enjoy.
Nice to meet you. Although, Alan, I'm trying to remember if we have actually met and ever spoken in person before. I don't know.
I don't think we met and talked, but I think we played a show in Paris a long time ago together. And,
like 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think you guys might have been...
Opened for you guys.
Yeah, I opened. It was like a double bill.
I was going to ask you about that because I remember that very, very well. And it was 2005. It was actually it was like in April, so it was almost exactly 20 years ago.
Oh, really? Yes.
Yeah, and we were really, really excited and about doing that show. And I don't know if we met you guys because you guys had babies with you, right? Or at least one kid with you.
Yeah.
And so there was like no smoking and all this kind of stuff, which was not I remember being impressed by that, you know, that you like your whole family and your babies were there. And so that you made the environment safe for you and your families. And, you know, and it's hard to do on the road. And anyway, I found that very, very cool.
Oh, thanks. I think we had at least Hollis with us at that point. Maybe Cyrus was pretty fresh, but I distinctly remember it being a kind of a small backstage, and
Yeah.
I think tour manager at the time might have just kind of took the initiative and said like, "Hey guys,
Yeah.
you got somewhere else you can hang because we're going to be really needing this."
No, 100%. No, it was great though. No, we
Okay.
remember that show. I mean, we were all big
Yeah, no,
fans.
I think about that time and I think, man, we must have came across as assholes because I just think
No. On the contrary, we learned a lot from that. I didn't have kids yet or anything like that, but now my daughter's 16. But I remember being very, very inspired by the idea of being a musician and being on the road and being in Paris with your kids in their playpen backstage and doing shows together and traveling the world with your family. I remember just really finding that so inspiring. So no. We learned a lot. We over the time we've had our tour managers kick everybody out or whatever because we just needed to protect ourselves, and I think we may have learned that a little of that from you guys. So thank you.
I remember you guys sounded great, and you're clearly on the cusp of people really blowing up about you, and it was cool to see you guys get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, that was a fun time. That was a fun time. But I've been a huge Low fan forever, and you are on your second, I guess, solo album since Mimi's passing, and they're both coming out on this, and I'm also on my second solo, and both coming out the same day.
I know, yeah, I saw that today.
And I've never met you, so when I've been getting pretty worn out by interviews, but this one I was really looking forward to. So,
Okay.
and honestly, we don't even have to talk about our records because I bet you're probably sick of that too, and so we can kind of talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, I figure we probably safe to say have different angle at everything from most interviewers. So yeah, I'm up for anything.
Yeah,
I've listened to your new thing, and I've listened to you guys multiple times, and follow what we're doing. It's pretty cool.
Well, I've got questions for you.
Good. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I guess one of them. I mean, you've gone through something much. Well, I won't try to describe, but what you've gone through in the past few years with losing Mimi, but and that's not necessarily what I want to talk about, but you've gone through also. I recently went through a few years ago, it's about 4 years ago now. A severe depression. And I know that you've also had that experience. And you've written about depression. You've written, and that is what I went through. It was like a 9-month, really, kind of really losing it and questioning your own sanity and all that kind of stuff. And a brief medical stay at a hospital.
Okay, yeah,
all that stuff. So a lot of things you've talked about and written about, and I've absorbed through your thing. I did experience my version of that, but then you've also talked really beautifully about grief and how depression and grief are very different, and that is kind of where I wanted to kind of pick your brain about that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you went through that.
Oh well,
it's scary, man. You made it
I'm
through.
I'm good. Yeah, and I see you seem good, dude, and everything. So I mean, we can talk about how we are now, and I think I'm in a happier, healthier place than I've ever been, really. And maybe some of that, going so far down did give me perspective. I don't know if I'm any wiser, but I feel maybe a little wiser, but barely, not really. I still don't, the universe is still a cruel mystery, but reading some of the things you said about the difference between grief that you've experienced intensely and more recently and depression, and that gave me some perspective on my own maybe outsizing of the experience of depression that I had, because I've been talking about it in press for 2-3 years now, about this period that was real and intense. But I feel like in perspective, it was an illness, and I bounced back, and I'm aware of it being a possible, place I could slip into again. I have perspective. But you've experienced those kinds of bouts of just those struggles, and then other I don't want to say more profound or painful in some ways struggles too. And I guess you've described them differently, and that's what I wanted you to kind of talk more about.
I guess what I've been sort of distilling from it as people have asked about these things the last couple of years is depression. Depression, a lot of the power behind it is confusion. And you're because it's an illness. Sometimes it's a chemical lack. Sometimes it's damage from trauma. But what it does is it confuses you. It makes you feel like shit. You're, you're around people you love. You're doing things that you love, but there's this dissonance. There's this confusion. You don't feel the same way about it. Whether it's things always looking dismal or fears always rushing forward and filling your mind, even as you're doing something around something that you enjoy, and that is, even the state of delusion. The delusion is not what's causing the damage. It's the confusion and the dissonance that it creates between what's real and that's where that's where people do things irrationally with others or with themselves.
Yes.
I was in my early 30s when that sort of hit most profoundly, and similar to you, there's about a half a year there, 6 or 8 months, it was really acute. Obviously getting to that point was a bit of a process, and sort of getting away from it and getting out of it and coming to a healthier habits and a healthier perspective took a while too.
That all resonates so close to, I mean, mine happened 4 years ago, but the slow buildup to it that you're not aware of, and then the 6 to 8 months, and I've heard this from, I talked with David Letterman a lot about it, and he has had this very, very, very similar, like very dark episodes and deep depressions, and it's always about 6 to 8 months or 9 months where it gets acute, and that's where your brain kind of melts, and that's where it gets really strange. And then sometimes, I mean, some medical intervention is needed, but then ultimately it's a real slow. It's a slow process out. It's not like all of a sudden you wake up, you pull out the window, look out the window, and the sun's shining again. It's like it takes a real long time for the sun to come up again.
It takes a while to come out of it. I mean, there's in some ways you're lucky if you have some sort of episode or crash, before things get really, really dangerous. At least a moment where either you realize it or people around you step in and go, okay, this is cross the line. We need to bring you to the hospital.
Was it your wife and your friend? Like it was my wife and my brother who finally they knew they couldn't help me. I was beyond their help, and you gotta, and they forced me to seek serious attention. I'm grateful to them for that. It was a terrible experience.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, really.
The hospital was a terrible experience. The brief to say, I won't say I did any healing there.
Same for me. Yeah, the hospital stay was keeping you alive for a few days and getting your blood system a little bit clear and maybe a couple emergency medications in you to keep you off the cliff.
Yeah. So then after that, like how slow was you're getting back to making music again? Because it took, I had to do it. I had no choice. I needed to. But the last 2 national records, there were 2 of them because there were so many songs that I just had tried before and just gave up on. But those guys didn't give up on, because I gave up on everything when I went through this, And so the making of those 2 records was both really, really hard at the beginning, just painful. I like sitting in front of a microphone trying to make noise. And then eventually, but that process, and then having to go on tour. The first time I had to walk out on tour, or even rehearse, or even be in a room with people after I was not well when we started, but the process of doing that and touring, and then 2.5 years, and that was a big part of my healing, is literally just like going out and doing the thing that I wanted never to do again, and never get anywhere near, and I thought may have caused it.
There's the dissonance, eh?
Yeah. So anyway, your long depression, you guys made some incredible music pretty quickly, or during it.
We were doing stuff as it was getting there, and we, it was still a struggle. After it was really acute with me, it was kind of a long process of coming out of that, and a couple different phases, and still things that I needed to figure out that were lingering. And my depression really was mixed with a lot of mania as well. And I was carrying around notebooks that I was writing every idea that came to my head, and a lot of it was really crazy. And here's how the military can be more efficient, and here's stuff like that, and here's the nature of God, and just really kind of scatological or almost and I don't want to say that it was necessarily conducive to creativity, other than that. I think kind of like you said, there was a little bit of like I have to do this. Part of it was just was a little bit of was at least in my perception, responsibility to the people around me, and then also I guess kind of all my life that's been the way of process things, and I've really gotten a lot of solace out of and a lot of help out of being able to creatively address something, and as crazy as it was, I'm glad I had that outlet.
Yep.
And I mean, depression and that stuff. I think some people will get the perception sometimes of like, oh, craziness, it enhances creativity, and oh, look at this thing, this person, this genius thing, or this great piece that someone created in the middle of mental struggles.
Yeah.
When it gets bad, it just shuts you down, and you're not really as productive as you're not. It's not productive, and you end up working out of desperation, and stuff is going to come out of you, and there are moments where you have a little bit of clarity, and you're able to edit something that was insane into maybe an idea that works. Anyway, it took a while. I understand you. Yeah, being that first time kind of getting out there to do those things. I honestly, I felt like I felt that a little bit more, in the shadow of grief and loss. There was definitely a second guess, questioning of myself, and not feeling the foundation and the stability was used to as I tried to do something again. Get on, like you said, get on stage again. So that was different.
Well, can I ask you about the last two records? And I mean, this leads me to want to talk about the new record, and the previous record also came out not long. It wasn't that it was after Meet Me Past that record. I was impressed how you had the courage and bravery and generosity to make music again for yourself. I mean, for yourself and for us. And it had all your guys. You're always looking for different things, and your records all sound different. And this one specifically, had a lot of vocal effects, and it had a lot of. It was a processing record, and it felt like that. Both their choices was of how the mixing and the producing and the style of songwriting and even the lyrical things. It all felt processing, and that made a lot of sense. And then this new one, you're much more clear voice, and the songs and the words are right up front, and it feels much more somewhat on another side of something. But of course I know you're probably not on the other side of anything. There's no other side of it. But because I remember as I was coming out and just from that depression, I could barely make any noise in front of a microphone, much less kind of put words together. My brain wasn't working, but I still was forced to make music. But your heart and your soul is still working, and it's trying. So your previous record really captures a processing through a complicated mess, and then this new one feels like there's some wisdom, and you've made something out of all of it.
Yeah, this first solo one was definitely just like I can't help it. My brain is screaming this chaos out, and yet I'm at the same time I'm terrified of my own voice, terrified of the concept of sitting down and trying to write anything. And that one was really it was very unintentional. I really was just, the impetus of that was really just messing around with tools that were unfamiliar, and it, in some ways hiding from what I normally do.
Yeah.
And in doing so, kind of found a channel that I was able to sort of release this incoherent explosion of, like I said, that was happening. And as it was happening, I just as a writer, you kind of recognize like, oh wow, I've found a conduit, and this is coming out, and this as a writer, when that's happening, your next step is to to kind of step back and make sure you
Yeah.
don't hinder this, let it flow.
You just let it be
Right.
what it is. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I mean, there was a good year and a half there of, besides playing music with my son, I really was not finding myself at all
Yeah.
with music. But so kind of finding something accidentally and sort of partway through it, realizing that maybe this is valid. I think that's how that went. And this next one definitely was recorded kind of more as a reflection, and now, kind of like, okay, that storm has ceased. Now I'm going to assess what's left of the yard and the house.
Yeah. Oddly, between the two records, I really really feel connected in sense and close to your presence on the previous one. Really,
Well,
really close. And maybe because maybe it's a little bit because it is behind a screen. It makes me listen zero and closer on you. But this one, you're so much more present, and it's beautiful, and your voice is beautiful, and it's all that bravery and all that. So you're right in center. But this one, in a strange way, Mimi's presence feels much more. I like when I'm listening to the songs, I'm picturing her, and I'm seeing. I'm just imagining her every time I hear you singing. It's
right.
it's your front and center, but every like even it's your voice. I'm here. I mean, then also I know you're, and I'm not talking about the fact that your kids are also contribute to this record, and there are other voices than yours. I'm talking about even when you're singing alone, Mimi's presence is almost more than you. I think that I was just me listening to it, and maybe just that's it's projection, but that's the takeaway I have from these two beautiful, really distinct but very powerful records.
That's really beautifully put. Thank you. I mean, I couldn't even, I couldn't even put that hope into words, but thank you. That means a lot that that's in there.
It definitely is.
Of course, hope it's there.
Is playing with your kids like is that? I mean, that must be. My daughter's learning. She plays better guitar. I don't play guitar at all, but my daughter's learning guitar, and I just. Do they want to be musicians, and do you want them to be musicians? And like, are you trying to talk them out of it? I mean, this life almost killed us. Like, do we really want our kids to go?
Well, I know. Do they really want this heartache and danger?
Right.
Unhealthy lifestyle. I think every parent who loves their kids probably has a little bit of a dream. Like, wow, I hope they're into something that I'm also into, because I can share that. And there's tons of ways that people manifest that. I mean, I know guys whose fathers,
they take over dad's business.
Take over the business, or you're gonna be a bigger basketball star than I was,
right.
or that kind of thing. Or and we of course have the same hopes, and you bring the kids along, they're exposed to music. It's a delight when they're teenagers and they start finding the music that they like, and you start seeing them find things that you also resonate with, and even the wonder of them finding stuff that you had never had much experience with. It can be eye-opening and really beautiful. So they of course developed that. They had piano lessons, and of course, hey, anybody wants to learn some guitar, let me know. And anybody want to play drums? We got a drum kit right here in the basement. Come on, and it's just held out, So
did the four of you guys ever just like go down, hang out, and just play? And like with that, and then it was that. I mean, that sounds too ideal. It sounds too Partridge Family. And it's probably not like that. But did you? I mean, yeah.
We kind of did. I when they were younger, right at the beginning of COVID. In fact, there was one point where I was like, hey, I know you guys can play this, and they were already. My son was already playing drum. He was playing drums.
And you were streaming these shows.
Yeah, we were streaming stuff.
They were incredible.
Yeah, there was a period early in COVID where I even was like, hey, you guys, I really need to practice. I'll give you $20 now. Like just rehearse with me. We'll go down and
That's funny.
play Neil Young songs and
That's
and play
amazing.
along. And they could tell, they're like, yeah, okay, Dad, yeah, all right, whatever. They're playing,
Wow.
but definitely over
Good.
time, there was definitely pretty distinct. Like you could kind of tell, like, yeah, I think I'm getting a sense that if I push them, they're maybe a little less excited
Mhm.
about it, and it becomes something that Dad wants to
Yeah.
do, and not necessarily something that
Oh,
they
yeah.
are drawn to. So there was actually a point where I was like, okay, well, I'll back off a little bit and just kind of give them some space on this, and it was hard, but sure enough, a couple months later, my son comes around with the bass, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, can you show me these
Yeah.
couple tunes?" It was like a Curtis
Yeah.
Mayfield song or something.
He's got cool taste. Well, I know that you were doing like funk and you were covering hip hop with him and stuff like that for a while. I mean,
Yeah,
is that his influences, like
for sure.
the Curtis Mayfield and the
Yeah. He's not interested in indie rock.
That's great. That's amazing. He's going to be so good. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's definitely deepened my exposure to some stuff. Like I was aware of Funkadelic and heard those records and stuff, but
Yeah.
love Sly and Family Stone. But like when someone's like, "Hey, I want to learn this song," and you're like, "Oh crap! I guess tonight when everybody goes to bed, I'm going to learn this Curtis Mayfield song."
Wow. Yeah.
It's a challenge, and of course you get into it and you learn. And it's similarly like my daughter. Like my daughter came home from college one summer. She's like, "Oh yeah, I recorded an EP." I'm like, what?
As a solo artist.
Yeah, as a solo artist. She
That's cool.
didn't tell us. I mean, I knew she wrote songs and she loved
That's awesome.
playing stuff, and but she kind of just did that on her own. And I think, again, I think the key to that is knowing when to give them their own space. My personality is such that I get a little more excited about things than people have the space for. So
well, I think you and I are similar. I run hot, and I run hot, and I, and I'm sure if I had testing, and I do therapy. I've done therapy. I'm not in therapy now, and I'm not on any medications. But the only time I was on the medications was during that dark period.
Really,
it lifted the floor. I mean, I smoke a lot of weed. I still drink and too much wine probably, but there's probably a name for some things that I have, whatever they are. And before with that period, I had 6 projects going on. I was building a house. I had trying to make a TV show. I had a national record. I had another Elvi record. I was trying to make, and I was starting to make this record that I finally now have finished. I was starting that. So, and then in the thing, you couldn't do anything. So I had to put everything down, and like all these ships that I had big ideas for that were out in the ocean, and even the National, which is like, the big cruise ship in the middle of all my other little projects, everything just sank. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think, but it was kind of, I think I was like, all those ships were going to run into an iceberg anyway. I was burning too hot for too long, too much time on the road, too many projects, saying yes to too many people and trying to, and I think I was just like, when you take on and you say yes to all these things and then you just burn yourself out, then you get mad at everything and you never want to do anything with anybody ever again. You just want to burn the whole thing down. I mean, you guys have songs, you have albums, named that or whatever, I think we might have, similar chemistries. And I think that's why I connect with your music so much, because I can tell you're processing so much stuff. We also have, I wanted to ask you about you were raised Mormon. I was raised Catholic, and I consider myself a good Catholic. I don't go to church or anything like that, but I did get all the good stuff, and I think I got out at 14, but I still consider myself a good Catholic, but I'm always I am writing about, I'm not writing so much about God, but I guess I am writing about God and all that, like what the hell it is, and really like, all that stuff.
What are we doing here?
All that stuff, and you do too. So I guess as raised, if I'm right, Mormon, and then and still a practicing Mormon. I like the word practicing because it's kind of what you're always trying. You're not really any good at it. You're just practicing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm still a practicing Catholic, but yeah, let me know like what are your thoughts on God and religion? Go.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's interesting you said about 14 because that's kind of about when my kids were just like, I don't know about this, and it definitely probably started us on the journey of kind of like, okay, well, what is this? And maybe we need to peel back a little bit of habit and righteous delusion and see what's really going on, and try to be a little more open-eyed about it. And so that's been an interesting subject for me. I mean, yeah, we were practicing, we were pretty active. We would still go to church. I would get jobs, or they call them callings in the church, where they asked you to be Sunday school teacher. And I was the children's Sunday school chorister for like 8 years. Stuff like that. So we participated in, for all intents and purposes, we're temple going Mormons, which means we were following the doctrine and taking part in the ceremonies that we take part of as an adult. And it's been really interesting because men getting sick and then process of losing her was a really interesting awakening. I both felt miraculous. It was heartbreaking, but it was also a miraculous experience in the universe. A lot of it was, I was able to witness things that people did for us that I really believe are the essence of whatever God is. And if God is there, these were the things that actually are the essence of God, and it was through other people and what they would do, what they can do for each other, and then meanwhile also the experience of, it would be oversimplifying to say that God disappeared, but it really shook my perspective and my about like what is really there, and it made me look at the things that I believed in the past and how they stood in contrast to the things that I knew. And by know, of course, I don't know everything, but I don't know. I've talked about this before. The experience of something and someone being so real and being more real than anything that you can touch. That disappearing is a lot more of a shock than I think most people are ready for, especially if you're a person that sort of follows a certain faith and has a certain perspective of like, okay, why are we here? Who is God? Where were we before? What's the point of this? Where are we going? The concept of eternal life and these things was really shaken, and I've really had to come to terms.
By the lack of her physical presence, you mean?
Lack of physical and also presence. Period.
Oh,
Presence at all.
meaning
Yeah.
sometimes you find yourself and you haven't thought about her in a while, and that's what it feels like. Is it?
I always maybe had a perception that there was a part of us that would always exist, and that we would be able to sense that. And I don't know if that was folly or misunderstanding on my part, but it's sort of the first time in my life facing that, and then sort of having that standing next to, well, here's the things that I believed. Well, here's something that I am closer to, quote, knowing than I ever have before, and when those, that
there's an imbalance.
That imbalance and disjunct really, if you're being honest with yourself, you have to really then go like, well, then all of this really is in question more so than I ever have ever comprehended it. I'm not dismissing it. I don't think it's out of anger. I don't think I'm going like, well, if God's going to do this, then I don't believe in them. I don't think it's that. I think it's just a new level of understanding of what is faith, what how much we don't know. Who am I? Who am I without that foundation? You know,
Yeah.
there's people everywhere who've grown up and lived beautiful lives and been generous people who did not have this foundation of like, we are children of God, and we are eternal beings, and we, you know, this, you know, without any religion, you know, and I tell myself like, well, how much of who I am was based on a belief, and how much of it is based on really am I a just and viable?
Am I a
So
good thing?
am I a
Yeah.
good thing, or did I have to be convinced and heavily propagandized into being a good person,
Yeah.
being ethical and I don't know. I mean, of course, yes, of course. I mean, I would hope that I would be a good person. I think generally we tend towards generosity. I think a lack of it is totally due to trauma and you know, the
Yeah.
imperfections of the world, and the hurt that we receive that then gets turned around and misinterpreted, and we process it, and
Fear.
we end up hurting others, and then it perpetuates their fear. And some people attain great positions of power, and those tendencies cause widespread pain that then
Yeah.
that then
It's
hurts,
fear.
and
Yeah.
and creates fear. Yeah. So I don't know, and I'm not ruling it out.
I'm not ruling it out either. I'm hopeful. I mean, like, I'm hopeful. We have a tendency to want to hurt each other, you know, and it's all fear, and fear is really easy to sell. And we've all the world has been through such a trauma, you know, with the pandemic, and then the continuing trauma and everything. And so fear is really winning right now. It feels like it is, and bravery, which is the bravery to see beyond the surface of a person, and like and the bravery to see that we all want the same things, you know, essentially like health and safety for our kids and survival, and we can do that for everybody. But fear seems it's easier to sell, and but I'm hopeful. I just hopeful that like once it all like me, I was overwhelmed by fear in those darkest times. It was fear.
Yeah.
It was panic, and panic. It was stacks of panic, and I couldn't leave the bedroom, but I couldn't sleep. It was and the insomnia. And I think the insomnia is what made
It's
me,
like most of them. That's the last.
borderline. What I thought might be, am I slipping into schizophrenia? But it was the insomnia, and it was finally when I got some sleep that my logic started to kick in again. I mean, there was no logic to my thinking, you know, and no matter how many people told me that, it wasn't until I got like just some sleep, you know, Xanax or whatever, trazodone, whatever it was, and it was the sleep that, and I think the world has not been sleeping well for 10 years.
I agree.
I think everybody's in a fear spiral, and everybody's in a mass depression. I mean, the world is in a dark mass depression right now, in a kind of a global way, and just like you said, when you're in that place, you lash out, and you're illogical, and you're mean, and it's a cry for help, I think.
Yeah.
Of course, you also have legitimate reason for being mean. Everybody's got a reason to be furious now. I mean, only 0.5% of all of us have all the wealth, and everyone else is suffering, and the planet's suffering. We're all in a trap together. You know, and it's whether you call it capitalism or communism or fascism or all, you know, we're all in the same, you know, money trap, power trap. I think the whole world, and so you know, but then. Yeah, I guess I wanted to pivot though to you talking about church, and you go to temple, and I stopped going to church, but I started going to rock clubs, and I was starting to get the same community and feeling of people believing in an abstract thing together in a community in rock clubs, and let me ask you, music. And spending your life with your family in so many venues and playing in front of people, it's very like what are the crossovers in that experience with your church and temple and community, because the community around a parish or a church or a temple is really powerful and really healthy. I was an altar boy, and I was up there swinging the incense and had the robes on, you know, until 14, until I just walked away. But then the whole community of going to rock shows and then eventually becoming a musician really is scratches that itch for me, you know, that kind of communication with God or a community.
It's That's interesting. Yeah, I think church, kind of at a young age, maybe provided an example of that then later, as I kind of got into music and sort of saw myself in it, it resonated. Yeah, the forms of that, Mormonism, because it's sort of an outlier. I mean, I grew up being part of this weird cult. It was kind of alternative to the rest of culture. Or there was definitely a sense of being this small tight knit group that would kind of get looked down upon by some people. Which then was just kind of hand in hand with punk rock,
Right?
And later on, and then I don't know, of course, the music of it. There's a lot of singing. Mormon church, I can definitely see that part of church is always the most resonant for me. And I mean, the idea, a group of people singing together is really powerful, and kind of having that common language. And I think there was definitely some carryover and some appeal to that when I went into music. Also in the Mormon church, like anyone among the congregation at any given moment could be called upon to be the person speaking, or the person, leadership.
Wow. Yeah.
Leadership is drawn from the congregation, and you get periodic times when you do this and that, and this is your responsibility. So the idea of like, okay, well, it's now time for someone to get up and address the group and be the
star,
or be the star or the boy. Well, I don't know. Yeah,
but be the lead singer for a minute.
Rock and roll brought that. Yeah. I mean, David Bowie brought that. Part too, but yeah, the appeal of being that person, that's. I think rock and roll was made that more appealing.
Well, to be in a big room in a community, and then suddenly you are the person, and then in an audience, and you have to say something to an audience, and and I had such a fear of public speaking, but going to church.
So did I. I was terrified of it.
But I loved being on, like when I went to church, and I was an altar boy, and I didn't say anything, but but we did hand out the Eucharist, in the blood and body of Christ, and all that, kind of crazy superstitious stuff. But
so you were proxy. You got to be
I was up there on the altar, and I would be, and the priest would be like, feeding the Eucharist and the wine to one row, and I would be doing the other row, and collecting the money, and all that stuff. Sure. But I don't mean this to be sacrilegious, but I mean, like all the girls in school and all the moms in school are coming up and with like this and sticking their tongues out for me to put the body of Christ. It was so erotic Powerful. And exciting, sure. And like, and I got to and they were like, and they were like, oh Matt, you were so good today, on giving out the Eucharist. I was like, oh thanks, and I think I got it. I think that I was like, oh, I like being on stage. I love all that drama. I love all. I mean, like churches are filled with graphic torture images everywhere. I mean, the symbol is that's a man in a young man, a 33-year-old in his underwear, and tortured to death. Right? It's crazy. And and as a teenager or a kid, and you're in there and singing songs, and all the girls from school, and there's all this smells and wine, and people putting money in a basket. It's crazy fun. It's wild, And so I did look forward to it. But then my mom was like, at some point it was like they won't let women be priests, and she's like, fuck this. And I was like, yeah. My dad was like, yeah, fuck this. So
God bless her.
So we all just quit. But my whole family, we're all good Catholics, still, even though, I mean, my dad still goes to church and stuff sometimes. But anyway, it's but for me, I think this whole rock and roll thing is a fun alternative to organized religion for me.
Yeah, a lot of similar parallels.
Yeah.
Or I kind of joke sometimes and I say I'm less of a musician. I'm more of a faith healer than I'm a musician and entertainer.
No, but when you see a bunch of people,
church.
No, I mean, I know you experience this. You probably see thousands, hundreds, thousands of people when you perform. Sometimes, and they're crying. They have their kids with them. They're crying with their buddies. They're crying with their girlfriends. They're crying with their kids, and they're singing out. It's very healing for everybody, for you too.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, when I started going after being so sick and never wanting to walk on stage again, it was actually to see all these people who actually really needed it. They genuinely needed it. If these people are out there crying, there is something in them that there's a knot that needed to get. And if it was my song or this performance or this lyric or whatever happened that loosened that knot and that their tears start falling, and they're crying and with their teenage daughter and teenage daughter and their dad are crying together. Yeah. How often do a teenage daughter and their dad weep openly and look at each other smiling, laughing, and that they're both crying, like almost only at rock shows, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I've never seen that happen in church. I'll tell you that.
No.
So seeing that, amen, man. Yeah. No. So anyway, this has been just an honor to talk to you, and I love the record, and you've been a kind of a light for a long time. So it's been a real honor to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Being so intrusive.
Oh no, that's great. Everything you've said is really beautiful and resonates. And I don't know, I'm sure people can't see that my skull is sore from smiling with agreement. And
me too.
Yeah, I too have. Yeah, a lot of the first helpful moments going back into music definitely had to do with looking out and being more aware of what this is, and music's bigger than us, and the power that it brings to people's lives, and remembering that it's done the same thing to me. That's why we're still here.
Anyway, we'll go for it. I'll see you out there.
Out there. Yeah, be safe
in the churches.
Yeah, maybe keep up on your sleep, right? That's the key.
Right. You too. Out in the churches and in the trenches. I can't wait to meet you in person someday, man.
No, let's do it. That'd be great. All right. Be safe.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Talkhouse Podcast, and thanks to Alan Sparhawk and Matt Berninger for chatting. If you liked what you heard, please follow Talkhouse on your favorite podcasting platform and check out all the great stuff at talkhouse.com. This episode was produced by Myron Kaplan, and the Talkhouse theme is composed and performed by The Range. See you next time.